Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to another episode of Gumbo Cooking It Up with Yo-Yo. I am your host, Yolanda Martin Singleton. And Gumbo is a show about extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. Initially, I was saying ordinary people, but then I was quickened and convicted. No, extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. So today's episode is one that connects a long arc of America's civil rights struggles with the present day fight to protect our most fundamental right that we have, the right to vote. So, for generations, this has been our fight, our struggle. Black people, marginalized communities, we've pushed and pushed and pushed for this vote. And then we are now pushing for the country to live up to this promise of democracy. And so, just to net out a little bit for the audience, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that literally is the crown jewel of the civil rights movement, right? It was, to stop racial discrimination at the ballot box and irregularities and so forth. But over the last decade, despite what our giants like John Lewis and so forth have done, key protections like Section 5 pre-clearance and so forth have been gutted and threatened, and Section 2 is threatened. And now for us here in Louisiana, we are at the center of a major pivotal conversation, if you will, with the case Louisiana versus Calais. And so this case could, in fact, it's before the Supreme Court at this moment, and it could, in fact, determine the future of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And so, and of course, this would prevent vote delusion and so forth, ensure fair representation, give us the opportunity to, elect a person of our choice and so forth. But, a lot of states like, here in Louisiana with histories, storied histories of racial rather gerrymandering and so forth. This is what we're up against right now. And so today we're joined by extraordinary leaders who are at the helm of this fight. Um, we have Sarah Rohani with the Legal Defense Fund. Sarah is an assistant counsel with the Legal Defense Fund. She worked closely with Attorney Nelson on this case. And so we are pleased to have you this morning, Sarah, to share your wisdom with us. And then also we have congressional staffer, senior congressional staffer, chief of staff for Senator Cleo Fields, who is our congressional representative there out of the 6th district, correct? Here in Louisiana. And he is also former senior policy counsel with the Legal Defense Fund and did some, very important boots on the ground, grassroots fighting here in the legislature during his time at the Legal Defense Fund for redistricting and to secure that second minority seat for us here. We will be joined possibly shortly by Senator Barrow. So she was, of course, the schedule is tight, tight, tight today, but she's able to join in. She will come in and sort of give us the state of the state, see what's happening after the special session and so forth. All righty. All righty. So here we are. And Sarah, I want to start with you because I want to deal with, some of the, the erosion of our voting power and so forth. But if you could, talk about and put in context the Voting Rights Act, um, kind of bring us up an historical backdrop, if you will, of the landmark cases that have led to Calais.
Yes, so thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you here this morning.
Okay.
So, as you, I think, started off by saying that the Voting Rights Act is the crown jewel of the civil rights movement, and it is very much widely understood to be the most successful piece of civil rights legislation in our nation's history. Immediately after its passing, what we saw in this country was that barriers to actual voting for Black voters and other voters of color throughout the country were significantly reduced. And so, what this led to in many places throughout the country was a new effort to ensure that newly enfranchised Black people could not actually exercise their political power. And one of those classic ways to do that is through what we call gerrymandering, through drawing districts in ways that would disenfranchise the votes of a group of people. And in this case, and in the current case at the Supreme Court, often Black voters would be have their votes minimized or canceled out. And that is exactly what Congress addressed in several reauthorizations of the Voting Rights Act, and that strengthened the statute, the part of the statute that's at issue currently in the Calais case. And so there have been several landmark redistricting cases that have clarified and established the framework. The most important one for Section 2 cases, it's what's called Thornburg versus Jingles. And that's a case that came out in the 80s. That really established the current legal framework by which we bring Section 2 cases. And as part of, and that framework has been faithfully applied by courts since the 1980s. And that is part of what the opponents in the Calais case, such as the U.S. Solicitor General, as well as the state of Louisiana, are seeking to change this framework that's been faithfully applied by courts for decades. And the Calais case is a bit of a unique case because while LDF and other organizations sued the state of Louisiana originally in order to secure the second majority Black district, after the state of Louisiana passed that map, there was a racial gerrymandering claim brought against that map. So those are two distinct frameworks. Racial gerrymandering cases are brought under the Constitution, whereas Section 2 is a statute. So this case has really brought to light the two legal threads about that govern vote dilution and racial gerrymandering cases.
And Sarah, if you will, I want to follow up with that, the framework that you mentioned in that case. Can you net that out so that lay people can understand it?
Of course. So the Jingles framework, well, that's what it's called, the Jingles framework, based on the case name. And there are several preconditions that voters and plaintiffs have to establish in order to show that there's a violation of Section 2. So what they first have to show is that a district could be drawn that would be reasonably configured, meaning that it complies with the state's traditional redistricting criteria and also would be majority Black if it's on behalf of Black voters or majority of another voters of color if in other contexts. And so that's what we call the first Jingles precondition. And the second two are about what's called racially polarized voting. So plaintiffs have to demonstrate that minority voters, Black voters, vote for specific candidates, and consistently their votes are just outweighed by the majority bloc. And after establishing those three preconditions, plaintiffs then have to demonstrate what we refer to as the Senate factors. So these are 9 non-exhaustive factors that really serve to show that this Section 2 violations are not simply just based on data on those three preconditions, but also based on real life, historical and day-to-day conditions on the ground. So plaintiffs have to demonstrate the history of discrimination in the challenged district. Plaintiffs have to demonstrate that Black voters have consistently been shut out of the political process based on a lack of success of Black elected officials. And the other very important aspects are demonstrating that the current elected representatives have not been responsive to the needs of Black voters in their communities. And so all of these pretty extensive and difficult to prove elements are what plaintiffs have to show in order to be successful and demonstrate that Black voters' votes are consistently being diluted under the current district lines.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much. Senator Barrow, before you jump off, thank you so kindly for coming on with me this morning. If you can, just talk to us a little bit about how have the changes in demographics and redistricting patterns and state legislative behavior from from your standpoint, your side of the house, how do you believe that has affected the voting rights effectiveness? And then also, if you will, you can also share with us sort of the state of the state. Where are we now in terms of this special session? What was supposed to come out of that session? So you can take either of those or one of those, if you will, and we can follow up with Jared on that as well.
Good morning, and thank you so very much for having me. I greatly appreciate you providing this level of education, especially for our community, because we have been talking about that a lot, and people don't quite oftentimes understand the impact of what's happening until, unfortunately, until it happens. So I greatly appreciate this. And I'm going to start off with the special session that was absolutely unnecessary. The only thing that I would say good came out of that was the fact that we did a resolution that would require the state of Louisiana to step up and to fill in SNAP benefits for those individuals who were currently receiving those. But the session itself was unnecessary. That we called, the governor called a special session for us to change the date of qualifying, the qualifying days and the election days, in hopes that the Callais case would be decided upon. It would be in their favor, and we could come in and ultimately come back in into another session to redraw the maps. And so it was absolutely a premature move. Again, it was unnecessary. Um, it actually heightened the level of tension among legislators. There were legislators actually on the opposite side who really did not want to be there doing that and felt the same way. But again, this was the order that we were given, and we showed up and we voted accordingly. So, of course, all of the Democratic members voted against changing the date, moving the date, changing qualifying, changing the election date, and all the Republicans voted for it. This, to me, really sets a very dangerous precedent going forward. And we hope that our comments and statements that were made, because we absolutely did not have the votes, especially in the Senate, to stop anything. But we hope that our comments will be something that's taken into consideration, added to the record. And I know Jared probably will speak to that in terms of how those things are important, because oftentimes, while we may not have the numbers, we have to continue to be engaged in the battle, in the fight, and making the comments and making the argument so that that information can be utilized when it goes to court. I will say, though, it is very concerning and almost disheartening to see where we have moved from. So I have been in the legislature 20 years this year, and I have watched the level of partisanship that have really begun to try to invade Louisiana. Um, there are many members, both Republican and Democrats, who really fight really hard to try to work towards what's in the best interest of the people. But yet we have this ugly monster that keep raising its head to say, oh, the Democrats did that, blah, blah, blah. We all work for the same people. And at the end of the day, the people who have elected us, they don't care if we have a D or R, or I, O, or whatever behind our name. Many of them don't. They just want to make sure that we are taking care of the things that concern them. And I have watched that grow over the past 20 years. The newer members who have come in my opinion, with this more divisiveness than I've ever seen before. And not really caring. Some of them forget that that they have some minority representation in their district. I think they forget. At least it sounds like they forget. Uh, and so making sure that people understand the dynamics. When we talk about numbers, elections matters, number one. Numbers matters because there are at least, I think, about maybe at least 2 to 3 seats, more seats that we can have in the Senate that we currently don't have today. Um, and I believe, if my memory serves me right, I think that some people have actually drawn a little bit even more, but I know that we can have at least 2 to 3 additional seats, which would then almost give us right at that 2/3 mark, so that anything that requires a 2/3 vote, it makes them have to come and negotiate with us. Fortunately for us, we do have a president of the Senate who is really engaging. But if we did not, we would absolutely be null and void in terms of the numbers, because we don't make up the representation. It's 39 members in the Senate, and only 11 of us are Democrats. So they don't, it's a simple majority on most things, and anything that requires 2/3 votes, which is 26, we don't have the numbers.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
again, those things matter. And if we are able to make those changes, then oftentimes, at least they're going to have a conversation with us. But more importantly, when people begin to hold our legislators more accountable, they will be more responsive to them. And that's why this is important, because people do, I believe that people don't oftentimes understand their power,
So,
and they
Senator,
truly can make a difference.
yes, I'm sorry. So that just totally blows my mind that, what I see happening now, what I see going on in Congress, and you mentioned that sprawl that's coming into the Louisiana legislature, that mindset, the divisiveness. It's it's like what happened to our civics lessons we learned about representation, and you represent the people that put them there become voiceless once they get in these seats, and then they get in the seats and take directions from others that didn't put them there. And so then the people are left with no representation. And you mentioned a lot of these um, legislators totally ignore the minority constituents that they have in their districts. I thought that was a very poignant point that you brought up there, that they ignore the very people that they represent. But I thought that was very interesting. Thank you for bringing that point up, because what do the people do? The people are just left unrepresented, even in Congress, even in our state houses, when that happens.
And unfortunately, this is what I believe that I have seen as a result of that. As a result of people feeling that way, they have become disengaged and believe to think that their vote doesn't matter. But it is absolutely the opposite. If more people will go out and vote, they can actually uh, they can actually require these individuals who are in office to be more accountable, or when reelection comes up, find another candidate to run.
Yeah.
And people don't realize just the level of the power that they have. They just think, oh, well, this is what it is and we can't change it. No, you can change it. When you look at the electorate of this state, and you look at the people that we have currently elected, every election that we have, and now I'm just going to talk about minority representation, we can influence every election from governor all the way down, but we have to vote.
Yes.
And we need to understand the power of the vote. And sometimes so when I first got in office, I saw this a lot more, where I saw individuals, and sometimes you can even tell who was a Republican or a Democrat.
Hmm.
Um, but I would see them more engaged with their constituency. And I'm gonna give y'all this one funny story that I will never forget. After Hurricane Katrina, and this was with a Republican, and this was an older member, but she was, and she, I don't even know if she was Democrat or Republican, but she was in a one of those electric strollers, and we were looking at something with the levees. I can't remember exactly the bill, but he was completely opposed to it. That woman rolled up on him so fast, guys. And I mean, when I tell you she got in his face, she got in his face and she was relentless. I believe that one woman alone changed his vote. And those are the kind of things that we need to have happen. People have to understand the weight and power of their vote and their voice. Um, and all of us are subject to being held accountable. And then sometimes you may not know the reason why. Some people, may not agree with something that I voted on, but have that conversation so you can understand the why, because there may be something behind it that you don't see. But again, I just want to emphasize the importance of this whole voter education that you're doing, explaining what is happening so people can understand what's at risk and what happens if Section 2 goes away. Because if Section 2 goes away, let me tell you, we are all in jeopardy from Congress all the way down. And that's the other part that people need to understand. They're talking about Congress today, but tomorrow it'll be the legislature. The next day it'll be city council. Then it'll be the school board. And representation matters. People who understand the plight, who walk the walk, who knows the journey, needs to be the people need to have the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice with people who understand the plight and the fight.
Yes. Thank you.
And one thing that Senator Barrow mentioned, Yolanda, that I want to elaborate on why Section 2 is so important. And one lesson that I learned from her is that for minority voters who don't have someone at the legislature representing them, they still are going to go to another minority. I remember
Yep.
when I drafted resolutions, worked with Senator Barrow in the legislature. Every day she had a church anniversary, a pastor's anniversary, a choir anniversary. And I'd be like, Senator Barrow, this isn't even in your district. Why are we doing a resolution for this one? And then she's like, well, they are in this district, and this person doesn't respond to their messages. This person, they don't feel represented by this person. That their voice, they don't feel that they can reach out to, Representative so and so and actually be heard and have them listen to their issues. And so they come to me. And so when you are a minority in the legislature, you represent other minorities from all over the state, not just those who are in your district. And that's why Section 2 is so important and why this, as Senator Barrow was saying, the representation, it matters so much on every level.
Oh, that
Thank you for bringing that up, Jared. That's very good. Very true.
yes, yes. I mean, these are very pointed um, points and factors here that you're bringing up, and that's just kind of glossed over many times, and because that's what this episode is about, getting this message to the masses and empowering the boots on the ground, if you will. And so in that, Jared, if you can just Sarah, you put a pin there because I want you to come back to this Calais case for me. uh, Jared, if you can just give us a little bit of sort of what is the pulse of Congress right now on this. I mean, we see everything we see on TV. We know we just came out the shutdown. Even if you can, bring us out to there and kind of see what is your outlook from being right in the center of it all in terms of redistricting patterns and so forth coming out of all of this, because it's all manipulation. Everything we see going on is just manipulation. It goes against the very fiber of everything we learned and know as constitutional rights and so forth, and all of these things. It's just thrown out the window.
Yeah, I wish I had better news or a better outlook, but this is very, very dark times we are in right now. As Senator Barrow was alluding to, yes, this is about Congress. This case, Calais, is about the congressional map in Louisiana. But if Section 2 goes away, that affects the Metro Council in Baton Rouge. It affects the school board in Ascension Parish. It affects the city council in Gonzales. Every level of representation is affected by Section 2, and this is particularly acute in Congress because we think, all these seats are safe irrespective. But when you really look and see who has brought the litigation, LDF is responsible for both of the seats in Louisiana. Um, LDF sued the state in the 1970s when Governor Treen was governor to get the seat that's currently held by Troy Carter. So if Section 2 goes away, we there's a possibility that we could be left without any representation. And that's not just Louisiana. Without Section 2, Benny Thompson's seat in Mississippi goes away. Terry Sewell and Shamari Figures, who both are minority members in Alabama, both of their seats were created by Section 2, Section 2 litigation led by LDF and the ACLU. And all the way up to seasoned and veteran members like Jim Clyburn, former minority leader Jim Clyburn's seat was created by a litigation under Section 2 in South Carolina, and there are members of that state legislature ready at the gun for the moment that this case comes down to draw him out of his seat and force him into a district that is majority white. And so there is a potentially to lose. There's a potential for us, Yolanda, if Section 2 goes away, that up to 19 members of the Congressional Black Caucus could be wiped out within the next couple of years. That's how crucial and consequential this is. And that's just if Section 2 goes away. We are already under a critical attack with redistricting across the state, across the country. President Trump has told Republicans everywhere that if you are a red state and you have a Republican governor and Republican legislature, there is really no excuse for there to be any Democrats representing your state in Congress. And we've seen it in Texas. Veteran member Al Green, who has been just such a tremendous champion on labor issues, on so many issues related to civil rights. His seat has gone away. The former seat that the late great Sheila Jackson Lee held, that one has been taken away through redistricting. Just all over the state of Texas, five members of the Congressional Black Caucus have been wiped out overnight, essentially. And we've seen that in Missouri, we've seen it in Florida, we've seen it in North Carolina, and it's the potential if Section 2 goes away, it's only going to accelerate. So the stakes could not be higher. It's really hard to overstate, as Sarah was saying in the beginning. It's really hard to overstate how consequential what the Supreme Court is about to do will be for minority representation for decades.
So this is like beyond huge to me. It's beyond huge. If I could use my little 6-year-old great niece, this is like, bananas. You understand what I'm saying? And it's like the manipulation that has happened, the smoke and mirrors, doing all of these things. This stuff is happening while other decisions are being made, shaping and directing the country to exactly what you just alluded to, Jared. And so my question,
One thing that I want to go back to, Yolanda,
sure.
is that Senator Barrow was there in the 2011 redistricting cycle, and she was we worked together then on when we were attempting to create more minority seats in the legislature, and we went from a 7 district congressional map to a 6 district congressional map, and all of that is because of Section 2. You think that the majority in the legislature was, drawing all these minority seats out of goodwill because it was the right thing to do. No, they were forced to do it by the law. And so I think Senator Barrow, if you want to speak to that, what will be the consequences in the legislature the next time we have to do redistricting without Section 2?
She may be you're muted still.
Trying to unmute myself.
Yes, I wanted to, and then also to Senator, because I was going to ask that question. Also, how because it seems at this point that the burden is shifting to the community to sort of hold everybody to the ground, at least, make more noise, create, records, um, get things on the record, at least so, because we still have the courts. We still have the
Right.
courts. And so it seems like this burden has shifted to our
So
community. So how do we galvanize and do that? And then also please touch on that one, what Jared was just saying.
and if I forget to say anything, just please bring it back to my memory. But I'm gonna start with you first, because again, these type of conversations need to happen just throughout the community so people can understand the importance of it and the weight and the gravity of it. Um, we are in a generation that really, and I'm gonna say individuals that are younger than me, because I kind of came up right during the civil rights era. I was very young, but there are things that I remember, and there were things that was taught that I never forgot. And so our younger children, they don't understand the struggle, they don't understand the fight, they don't understand any of this, nor do they really understand the power of the vote. Um, and so making sure that they understand the risk that we are currently at, and I call it a crossroad. I think there are people who have been very intentional about this whole strategic plan. And if voting was not so important, or if it wasn't the greatest equalizer, you wouldn't have people who have been planning for decades of figuring out how they can unroll it, and or how they can lessen the impact of people, minority voters, and ensuring that they don't have the right to vote. So that is the one thing that these type of meetings, having more of them, having them across the board, having them in unusual places, like I'm gonna just use this as an example, like beauty shops, where you have people who have never thought about it. They don't know and understand necessarily the connectivity of it, but how you can break it down and they can ask questions in small settings. That's one thing. Number two, going back to what Jared said, and he's absolutely correct. And I'm so glad that you brought it up. I don't want to call him my baby, y'all, but I always see him as my baby. I've watched him grow up, and I'm so very proud of him. Let me tell you, when I tell you I'm proud of somebody, I'm so proud of him. But he was there, and because of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, there were members who knew they were going to lose their seat, and so we all had to come to the table and begin to look at how we begin to redraw these minority districts. And they knew, right? So they knew they didn't like it, but they knew that they were being drawn out because they know there was a population shift. And that population shift required that people of color, minority individuals, need to have the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. Now they can still choose to run, but at the end of the day, we had to draw those seats. And it was only because that's what the law stated. Um, and I can tell you, people are not going to just willingly do that. So if the law is removed, that part of the law is stripped, we will see this. And Jerry, just going back to what you said, I was at a legislator and from Missouri who happened to be in Louisiana at one of the games, and we just started talking, and we talked about the Callais case, and she said, this is going to impact my seat. She said, because I am only in that seat because the law requires the minority representation in Missouri. And so, again, this is not just something that's going to impact Louisiana, it's going to impact the entire country. And it's important that we have representation. It's important that we have people at the table who can speak to those matters, to those issues, who understand them, because they have also lived their life to some degree, or they know the life of the people that they represent. So, again, this is huge. We need to have more of these kind of conversations. We need to give people the opportunity where they can ask questions in a place where they feel safe to ask them, and then teach them how to go out and teach their families. And then let them know that every election has consequences, because we are here today. And this is just my personal belief. Um, because had we gone out and voted a little differently, these conversations may not be coming up because we would have different representation.
Absolutely. Thank
And
you.
one
So
example I want to
Sarah,
give,
oh,
if I
go
can,
on.
yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm
Okay.
trying to get Sarah
Okay,
back.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So put a pin there. I don't want you to forget that. So, but Sarah, Senator Barrow said something. So if you can sort of connect the dots for us about the implications that Calais has on, may have for other states and with significant minority populations or historic vote delusion concerns. And then also, I want you to sort of tell us how these maps will look. What we have now, because we all know what we have now, but if you can net out for our audience sort of what we have now and then the threat of how these maps will look. And Jared mentioned earlier that, the number that we will lose if, this case goes differently. But if you can do that, sort of, connect the dots with the case and what this looks like for other states, the impact in other states, and then how these maps will look here.
So the consequences, depending on what direction the court may go, if the court significantly weakens Section 2, the consequences really would be dire. I think it's really important to highlight what Senator Barrow and Jared mentioned, that the Voting Rights Act does not only apply to Congress, it applies to every single jurisdictional body in this country. And just going back a decade, it's important, I think, to discuss a previous case, Shelby County versus Holder, where the court essentially invalidated Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, the other key provision of the Voting Rights Act. But in that opinion, which was authored by Justice Roberts for the conservative majority of the court, they explicitly stated that that opinion in no way affected the ban on voting discrimination in Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And so basically, part of what they stated is that there still will be this vehicle for remedying discrimination with Section 2. So if that was significantly weakened now, particularly with some of the proposals that the Solicitor General has introduced, that would mean in places like Louisiana and many other parts of the country where the only progress that Black voters and other voters of color and Black candidates and candidates of color have been able to make is because of the Voting Rights Act. All of those districts would be up for grabs. I think it's very important also to highlight that in Louisiana, outside of the New Orleans area, the only successes for legislative Black candidates has been through Voting Rights Act districts. And we even saw at oral argument the Solicitor General for Louisiana say, when asked about the consequences, that they didn't know what would happen if there were no Section 2. Potentially, the state would go back to a 6-0 congressional map where there would be zero opportunities for Black voters to have
Wow.
any ability to elect candidates of their choice, sending us really back to a pre-1980s period. So the risk to our multiracial democracy would be very, very stark if the court were to really significantly weaken Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And that will be incredibly significant in jurisdictions throughout the South, as stated, local jurisdictions, federal districts. And it's not just the South, it's all over the country, California, places all over.
Wow. And so about the maps.
So the maps in Louisiana, it's very difficult to predict. I think Jared did a really great job of highlighting the various congressional districts that can be eliminated if there's no more requirement to have Black voters and voters of color actually have their voices heard, which really is the promise of American democracy. So it is difficult to predict, but we are seeing it happen right now at the congressional level. And so there is no reason really for local jurisdictions to not follow suit, for state legislatures to not follow suit. So I know I've stated the consequences would be dire, and I think it's even more so highlighted by the fact that it's really difficult to even calculate what the maps would look like.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Jared, I don't want you to forget that point that you were about to make. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, so Senator Barrow was talking about how important elections are, and the example when I'm talking to especially youth groups, as I go back to the election of when Governor Edwards was reelected in 2019, that election was that race was a whole lot closer than it should have been, but the Legislative Black Caucus activated Black voters all across the state, and they made the difference and got him across the finish line. And why that is so important is that 3 years later, when we needed a veto for the congressional map, when the legislature passed a map that continued to pack Black voters in New Orleans and Baton Rouge into a single district, the Legislative Black Caucus, the Power Coalition, the ACLU, the entire coalition that we had put together, we went to the governor and said, Governor, this is important to us that you veto this map for 1/3 of the state. And Senator Barrow was very much involved in that campaign, and Sarah and I and the folks of the Power Coalition, and we spoke to your chapter in Ascension, Yolanda, about how important it was to let the governor know how important that this was crucial to us, to the Black voters who had put him back in office, who had gave him another 4 years, who gave him another second turn, and got him across the finish line. How crucial having that veto was to us to send a message that no, this is not right for a state that is 1/3 Black. I think it's 1.4 million Black people in the state. There's no way New Orleans and Baton Rouge should continue to be packed into a single district. And that's always the example I give Yolanda about how important it is to make sure that you get out there to the polls and polls and send that message. Because when that person is in office, they're going to remember who got them there.
Yes, and that has been your consistent message, probably even during the census, during the time that we were talking about the census and so forth. And while I'm there, just for our viewers, Jared, just talk about the importance of the census in terms of redistricting.
The census is the beginning and the end when it comes to redistricting. When we are looking at maps and when we're looking to see if it's possible to draw a map in Louisiana with two majority Black congressional districts, it all depends and determines who completes and fills out that census. And the census of 2020 was challenging for many reasons. Number one of which, obviously, was because 2020 was the once in a generation global pandemic of COVID-19. But then that was followed by the worst hurricane season that Louisiana had experienced since 2005 when we had Katrina and Rita. And as you well remember, Yolanda, that was Hurricane Laura that just devastated so many areas of the state. But when people complete that census and send it back in, those numbers are then used to determine how many people are in a certain parish. Whether East Baton Rouge gets District 101 back, which is in New Orleans, it's all determined by how many people complete that census. Whether, Senator Barrow was mentioning that there should be three more Black Senate seats in the state. Where those seats are located are all determined by who completes the census at their specific precinct, because each precinct has a number of people who are allocated, and that's how we determine how those lines are drawn.
And Jared, if you recall, we had you on when we did a social action activity. We were looking at maps because we really could have had another school board member here in Ascension Parish.
You should have, absolutely.
Should have. We should have.
It should have, absolutely. And we've been talking about congressional races, school board races. We haven't even gotten to judicial races. The 19th JDC and the judges who represent the Ascension Parish area. I mean, when it comes to the judiciary in our state, minorities continue to be grossly underrepresented.
Absolutely, absolutely. Guys, I feel like, this deserves a part two. And I think in the next conversation, we'll grab and bring President McClanahan in, the president of the NAACP Louisiana State Conference. But what I do want to do is, and I wanted to bring this out, Sarah, if you can make it really plain about the constitutional questions. that the court is asking in this Calais case? Just
Before she does that, can I respond to something that Jared just mentioned as it
yes, yes,
relates
yes.
to the consequences of the census? The other part of that is the financial resources that are
Yeah,
allocated per
yeah,
state.
absolutely.
So, based upon those numbers, that's where we are able to get how much money is going to go for education, how much money is going to go for healthcare, our SNAP benefits. All those things are taken into consideration in terms of those numbers. And so, I really employ people to make sure that they are counted. That's always a big sticking point. We are less than 4 years away before the next census, and we need to be having these conversations now so people are comfortable, relaxed, and understand the impact of being counted.
Absolutely. That's a great fact to bring out. And even, you know, um, people that are here um, illegally and so forth that consumed some of these resources that were based on the persons that were counted. That's another issue in and of itself. But I want to wrap this thing up here. This conversation is so good. I don't want to, but mindful of everyone's time. I do want, Sarah, I want you to net out those the constitutional rights at stake here in terms of our 14th Amendment, our 15th Amendment, and so forth, and just kind of make it plain. And then, if I can ask everyone, and Sarah, once you wrap that up, you can give me your takeaway. Just want to ask everybody, the closing question of given everything that we've discussed, you know, where are we now in the fight? What must happen next?
So the constitutional questions at issue, it's obviously complicated given the state of re-argument and everything, but the specific question at re-argument was whether the state of Louisiana violated the 14th or 15th Amendments of the Constitution by creating a second majority Black congressional district to remedy a Voting Rights Act violation. So this re-argument really focused on how whether Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which prohibits racial discrimination, um, applies in Louisiana and could implicate whether courts and whether lawmakers can continue to use that law's tools to remedy maps that dilute the voting power of minority voters.
And
And so
Sarah,
I
you
think
can just let us know what the 14th and 15th Amendment is. I think everybody needs to at this point. Let's go back and read the Constitution. Let's go past "We are the people" and read the Constitution. That ought to be required reading right now. But just net that out for us, please.
yeah, so the 14th and 15th Amendments are, the equal protection clause of the Constitution. And those constitutional provisions were adopted in the wake of the Civil War, specifically to protect against, discrimination in voting. And so Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act carries that promise of the equal protection clause and addresses racial discrimination. And the new argument from the other side is basically that pitting these two protections against one another, stating that attempting to remedy and address racial discrimination under Section 2 is itself discriminatory and violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. What's next?
So what's next? I think both Jared and Senator Barrow are best poised to address this question because as a litigator, we are obviously always here, prepared, more than available to address anything that comes out of the Callais decision. We'll make sure to adapt if necessary and not stop the fight from the litigation perspective. And we are ready to hit the ground running if and when anything changes after Callais. And we, of course, at LDF have an unbelievable organizing and policy departments that are, as it currently stands, preparing, speaking with communities just to ensure that everything is in order and we're not behind if and when we receive any decision from the Supreme Court. But I will let the other two experts speak on this.
Awesome, awesome. Senator Barrow.
I, first of all, want to thank you for having this because to me, this is a series of what's next. We need to be engaging our community, making sure that they are informed, educated about what's happening and how they can be involved. Well, I say this is first. I need to first say pray. Prayer is important because certainly we have gotten to where we are, I believe, because of the power of prayer, and I believe in that. And so I'm engaging folks and encouraging folks to continue to pray. But then secondly, I would say thank you to you. I want to say thank you to LDF. I want to say thank you to my baby Jared and all of the litigants who were a part of bringing that lawsuit. But then I would say to the people is that you have to get engaged. You have to be involved. You have to make sure that when you can show up, you show up. If you can't show up, you are sending word, whether it's through email, whether it's through phone call, whether it's whatever your level of advocacy is, you are making sure that you're present and making sure that these individuals understand this is important. Right now, we are at a crossroad. This is in the courts. And I am praying that the judicial system vote in the right way, in a fair way, according to what the law states. I, as an American, have the right to ensure that I have the right to choose who I would like to vote for. As an American citizen, when you think about the principles by which this country was built upon, that is now being infringed upon by them trying to actually strip this away from Section 4, the amendment, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So we have to keep saying that because we are American citizens and we deserve that right. And we have to keep saying that over and over and over again. But people need to understand the power of their voice and the power of their vote.
Amen. Amen. Jared?
What I want to leave your audience with
Oh, wait, before you start, Regina, Jared is my baby.
Oh, wait.
I'm sorry,
Hold up,
Senator.
Jared.
Senator, look, I prepared him for you all, okay?
Did you? Well, I'm gonna tell you, you did a great job because when he got to the legislature, I just adopted him and made him my baby.
And
Yeah.
I
And
appreciate
I
you
have
all
watched him
taking
just
care of
grow
him.
and thrive.
And
That
I'll
was a
just
little
say,
fun. Thank you, Senator.
other than my parents, no one more than the two of you has prayed with me, prayed for me, and prayed over me. So thank you both so much for that. Yolanda,
Amen.
what I want to leave your audience with is one thing that I've learned having been in Congress for the past year. The number one question I get from people is, "What can we do?" Job Corps is getting closed. This AmeriCorps Center in my hometown is getting closed. FEMA is getting cut. Um, they're taking away grants from Southern University. This program that does Meals on Wheels and provides housing vouchers, this program is getting cut. And everyone else calls our office and, well, what can we do? What can we do? And my response is always the same. The do was on election day during voting hours. The do was during early voting. The do was on National Voter Registration Day. At this point in a representative democracy, but by the time you're calling your member of Congress, it's honestly too late. Because so many people failed to vote in last fall's elections, we ended up with a White House, a House of Representatives, and a U.S. Senate that is basically just turned their back to minority populations and minority communities. And with us being in the minority, the tools that we have available to us are so limited. We can write strongly worded letters that the administration isn't obligated to respond to. We can, have our members of Congress give great speeches on the floor and raise and bring awareness to certain issues. But in terms of actually getting something done in a representative democracy, election day and early voting is that's when the do is. If you really want to see change happen in your community, if you really want to see things improve and go towards a better direction, voting is everything in a representative democracy. And because so many people don't understand that and have failed to show up, that's kind of why we're in the situation that we find ourselves in.
Absolutely.
Woo, that's powerful.
When we
That
vote,
is
we
powerful.
win. When we vote, we win. That is awesome. And that's our shared responsibility.
Yeah.
That's our responsibility right there. And we know that, the Voting Rights Act was was built and created by courageous people, by engaged people, by people that fought, that by people that persevered, who had courage, who had heart, who, the collective action of it all. It was a collective fight. And so I believe we have to continue in the same way that we achieved this. We continue in that same way to sustain it. So, but
A
yes, I thank you all kindly. And what I want to leave our audience with, what they can do is you can first check your voter registration, make sure you're voting in the right precinct, track your local redistricting decisions, support voter protection organizations, the power coalitions, and so forth. Volunteer as a poll monitor. I'm an elections commissioner here in my little precinct 32 here in Ascension Parish. Attend the school board meetings, attend council meetings, attend the committee meetings of these councils, of these bodies, and share things like this episode. We're going to push it out next week, but share this. These are persons that we brought on that are at the center of this fight. I mean, they could be on Joy Reid, Roland Martin, somebody like that. And I thank you all that you took your time to converse with Yo-Yo on Gumbo, cooking it up with Yo-Yo. So I thank you each and all, and the audience. I believe it's going to be educational, but it's going to be a treat for our listening audience. And so I thank you deeply for your time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. You're welcome.